I'm speaking to you this morning on the subject of community and storytelling. Last night, after a busy weekend of teaching in Rockland, which was really a lot of fun, I had a great class. Catherine and I dropped our suitcases in at the house and walked down that familiar path down the steps to Harbor Cafe. It was Methodist night there. I can tell you that if we were taking attendance, we'd have a good attendance. We sat down and it was fairly busy. And while we were eating our meal, Delbert came over and sat down and talked with me. I like Delbert. He is fun, and he has a good sense of humor, and he kids me a lot. Now, some of you will remember that over a year ago, I had the not-so-funny happening where a moose came into the side driver's door of my car up in northern Maine when I was on another teaching trip. Ever since that time, Delbert has never let me forget that. A few weeks ago, we were coming home from somewhere and going through Belfast, and a deer jumps over the guardrail, and it was so close that it was too close for comfort, but it was fine. Nothing happened. So over time, when I go on these teaching trips, most of the time, or several times, I always send Delbert a postcard from wherever I am. It generally has a moose on it, or a deer, and if I have been successful, I will say, "This moose missed me, but he's looking for you." So we were in Machias a few weeks ago, and I found this, Catherine found it, and I thought this is perfect for Delbert. Huge moose, cut out rack on the postcard. And we were eating in a diner, and Catherine was having a piece of chocolate cream pie. And she remarked that the chocolate cream pie, I hope I don't get sued for this, was far superior at Delbert's than it was where we were eating. So on the postcard, I say to Delbert, "This moose missed me, but is looking for you. And by the way, Catherine said your chocolate pie is far superior to the piece she just ate. See ya, Stephen." Well, Delbert takes these cards, first of all, and he shows them to many people. And secondly, he then posts them behind the cash register, just to remind him of how superior his stuff is. So last night, we were tired and we went downstairs, and after saying hello to about 150 Methodists, we were sitting at the table eating supper, and Delbert came over, and he said, we were on dessert. Catherine was eating dessert. I was having decaf, just so we want the record straight. Catherine was eating a piece of chocolate pie, and Delbert comes over with this grin on his face and says to Catherine, dead serious, "How's the chocolate pie?" I said, Delbert, well, I won't give a direct quote because I'm on the internet, but I said, "Delbert, you know very well how that chocolate pie is," and he roared, and we sat down and talked. You see, friendships and community are born by just telling each other stories. I went home and I kept laughing. "How's the chocolate pie?" I kept saying to Kevin, "How's the chocolate pie? How's the chocolate pie?" Jesus was an interesting person. And in the gospel that we just had read to us, he had a crowd coming to the point, I want you to imagine this, so many people were gathered around him on the seashore that he had to get in a boat and talk to them from a boat, because there were so many people gathered around, and he began to tell them stories. He started with a story about a farmer and crops, because it was an agricultural setting as well as a fishing community. And later on, his disciples said to him, "Why do you tell stories?" Because the religious people of that day were used to somebody sitting down and just reading the Old Testament to them and not telling stories about farming and fishing and sons that run away from home and then ruin their family's inheritance and come back. He was always telling a story. And Jesus said, because stories help us, nudge us toward insights. One of the things that I believe that we are created for is to tell each other stories. Can you imagine how horrible it would be if we talked to each other like a phone book? Name, rank, and serial number, and that's about it? That would be very uninteresting. Now, I think there's some ways you could use a phone book to teach. You can look at family connections, and you can, look at numbers and teach number sequence, and there's all kinds of ways to use a phone book, but it's not very interesting, is it? We are engaged with stories. There are 4 stories, or 4 circles of stories in our lives. There's our personal stories, our history, our perspective of who we are and where we've come from, why we're here now. The second kind of story is our family stories, because we were not born in a vacuum. We were born in a family. And so our family stories shape us. And then thirdly, there's the story of the community in which we live. If the regulations kick in on fishing, it affects what happens on this island in our community. The stories in the lives of people begin to change. Does this make sense? There are community stories. When there is a crisis or there is some great joy. Remember the year, a couple of years ago, when our varsity teams won both the state championship for basketball and the state championship for baseball? What was that? 3 years ago, Janine?
I'm not sure.
All right. It was 2-3 years ago. We won both. And the way that watching people from away experience this, living on Main Street, you see all kinds of things going on. People were coming out of, God forgive me, but the inn on the harbor and some of these places, and just standing there wondering what in the world was going on as people with fire trucks and people laying on horns and people yelling and screaming about how wonderful it was, and people looking puzzled with what's going on. Our stories of both joy and sorrow in the community is what binds us together.